Yeah, I'm gonna record this now, so I can put it in the video. So, I have Mr. Milk Dud Artist, Mr. Brian Word here, and he is a literature major, right? You dabble in a lot of stories, a lot of literature, and you're a teacher on this particular subject. So, I wanted to get his opinion on what he thought about the ending of Dead Rising 4, the original ending where Frank jumps on the chopper and he falls off. So Brian, you have the floor. Please explain to me what you think about this ending.
All right. Now, before I do say that, first thing is, while I did study like literature and creative writing, mind you, I'm not the biggest expert. My personal preference, and this is just personal, is that I try and go for I try to go against the grain when it comes to stories. And there's good stories that are cliche, but my personal thing is try to go against the grain.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, while I'm not the biggest expert, again, some of what I've seen, it makes me wonder how a lot of people can get away with making money, but you know, it just happens anyway. Now, as far as this ending, let me put it this way: if I had more space in my room right now, and somebody I didn't like was standing in my room, all anybody would hear is "I'm mad," and the chair would just fly across the room.
Yeah, because this ending, just from a quality standpoint, and don't mind my dog, but this ending from a quality standpoint is just not that good. And it's very anticlimactic to me. Frank just jumps on the chopper. That's it. You assume he's dead. There's no conflict resolution. I mean, he might have saved some people, but still, the DLC continues on to tell his story. It sounds like it's telling his story some more with the fact that he's freshly infected, even though he was infected in the previous game and it wasn't really clarified how he got past that infection. It's just stated that now he's infected again. So there's some loopholes here. There's some story details that are left to the cutting room floor about the previous games. And I guess you could say that's a plot hole if he's infected again and he was infected in the previous game, unless of course he cured himself with who's that kid's name in Dead Rising 3? I forget his name. Nick Ramos. Unless he cured himself with his blood, I mean that's the only way that he could have possibly cured himself. But I don't think that Dead Rising 4 explains this.
Yeah, because Nick was immune from what I remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Frank, he he had some immunity, but it wasn't to the same effect of Nick's immunity for some reason. Because I remember watching a playthrough of this one guy, and at the end, Frank, you know, he finally made it to the chopper. The guy who flew him in, he was good up until a zombie attacked him on the helicopter, and then he just dies, and the helicopter gets blown up, and then he gets surrounded, and then it's like then he has to survive the what was it, that tactical squad, which he does, but then it's like after that you just don't know. But he's still infected at the end of the day. How he's still how he's still surviving, no one knows. Because Dead Rising 3 takes place what? How many years after 2? Yeah, because if we're talking about a number of years here, then that's a serious plot hole that needs to be addressed. Now, the big thing when it comes to like any good story is that you want to try and make it to where your story, when you make it good, you want it to where it's not as many plot holes as there can be, because there are some stories where there's plot holes, but then at the same time, it's like the plot holes are not really that serious.
So I found out when it takes place. It takes
Yeah.
place 10 years after Dead Rising 2.
Okay. See, if that's the case, then Frank, I doubt his immunity would hold up all that well. Because like if you're talking about 10 years, it's like it's not the same as something like it's not the same as something like HIV or nothing like that. HIV can stay with you, and that's if it doesn't get any worse. Same thing with like some other diseases or even just genetic stuff. But in the case of this, it's like if he's survived 10 years, how did he do it? Did Nick have some involvement with it?
I assume it was probably because of the Zombrex, him constantly taking that over and over again, but even still, it's like he did this for 10 years. And then when we get to Dead Rising 4, they really don't explain how he's cured or not. But going back to the ending, I still want to get your thoughts on this, man. Like, what do you think of it from a storyline standpoint, a creative standpoint? Do you think it's actually good?
It's honestly, it sounds overly cliche, which unfortunately can be bad. Like when I was in college, our teachers made a point of having us try to avoid cliches, and so that when we were giving any follow-up thoughts and opinions on each other's stories, we actually found that they were pretty good. So it's very much possible to avoid the cliches, but this is heavily cliched. And then on top of that, it kind of makes me wonder, like, okay, so this ending sound like I said, it's cliche, and it sounds like something I've seen in like a bunch of other movies too. Because if I'm if I'm being honest, much as I don't want to talk about this, this sounds like the kind of thing that would happen in the Resident Evil movies, not the CG movies, the other movies.
Live action?
Yeah.
Oh my god, yeah. Even the stories for those, like you gotta turn your brain off and enjoy it. I mean, it's popcorn fun, but it doesn't mean that it's a good ending.
Yeah, because like something that happens with the RE movies is that between Apocalypse and Extinction, you find out the little girl that they found in the school that she was killed before Extinction, and there are apparently novels that coincide with the movies, but you don't necessarily know about that. But even then, it's like almost every Resident Evil movie that ends, it's like it's usually the main character, maybe one or two or a few more people, but then it's like she usually survives in these. And this one, it just sounds like one. And this, it just sounds like one of those things where it's like, in order for them to live, he has to sacrifice himself for the greater good of humanity so that they could live on and the story can be told. And it's like, that sounds all good, but here's another thing. For anybody who's played Dead Rising or even at least seen the story and the gameplay, like these zombies, they're somewhat mobile, but they're not all that smart.
Yeah, I mean, the zombies are pretty much dumb in Dead Rising, but um, I want to go to the point of that final part where there's the narration with Vicky, and
Oh,
she
okay.
says, "This is how Frank, would have wanted it. He would have wanted this to be the end of his story if he was here." What do you think about that in particular?
I'm trying to figure out, does that mean he wanted to tell the story as he wrote it, as in maybe there were some embellishments?
I
Because like
think I think it's maybe that or getting to the bottom of it, or maybe he wanted to be, heroic and end it there. But to me, it sounds like the description of this and going into Frank Rising, it sounds like there's more to the table because Frank Rising is setting up this whole big conspiracy of more stuff going on behind the scenes. A lot of people don't believe that this is gonna happen because they think that for some weird reason, freshly infected means that it's gonna take place like eons after the original ending of Dead Rising 4. But to me, and I put this in a twit longer, freshly
yeah,
infected, fresh, that means new.
yeah,
New, it just occurred. It's something that is very recent. So I think that this ending is going to take place after he gets bitten on that helipad and is going to continue on from there. I don't know why people are damage controlling, saying that this is not going to happen or that Frank is a zombie. Because the ending of Dead Rising 4, you sort of like fight this enemy that he is a zombie, but he knows how to control himself.
oh,
Like,
okay.
it's so ridiculous. It's wacky. It's ridiculous. I mean, of
It,
course, it fits in with that Rising, but I don't think this is gonna happen to Frank.
I was gonna say that sounds a lot like was it Land of the Dead all over again?
Oh yeah, I remember Land of the Dead.
Because you remember there was that was it what did they call that one zombie it was the black dude who was ridiculously smart for some reason. I
You
think
mean you mean the one that could hold the gun?
yeah, I think what did they call him? Big Daddy?
I don't fucking know. I don't know what they call them, but uh,
It's like if
yeah,
they're doing that, then it's just like if it's an homage, okay, I could deal with that. But on the other hand, it's just like the biggest thing, with the exception of the Resident Evil movies, that I've come to notice is that most of the time when you're talking about a zombie game, they're never really they don't evolve past what they're capable of. Because like for one thing, they're dead, and number two, you know, if they're dead, the only thing that's driving them is search, eat. That's it. So it's like it's not like how in Resident Evil crap, what was the name of that movie? Resident Evil Retribution. I don't know why I couldn't think of it. I saw that movie. I watched that movie like too many times to not remember. But
I do not remember all live action movies, so I'm sort of drawing a blank on that one.
pretty much, pretty much with Retribution, pretty much everybody that Alice met in the first movie, the Commandos, they get cloned. You know, the black dude gets cloned, Carlos gets cloned, Michelle Rodriguez character gets cloned. Like they get cloned. Most of them, with the exception of Michelle Rodriguez character, get killed again. And when her character Rain is fighting Leon and Luther, you know, she's kicking both their butts. Alice, for once, is getting her butt fully kicked by someone as good as her, but then she frees Jill. She goes to fight Rain, and she has to shoot the icy ground because they're in Russia. And these zombies, they've actually evolved because you know it's like with the T virus in the movies, it's like it's still the T virus, but it slowly evolves into this parasite that makes the zombies stronger and smarter. And so then when Alice shoots the water, the zombies come up. They drag Michelle Rodriguez's character under, and they all just start swarming her. Now, mind
Yeah,
you, like I said, these guys were evolved. They could, you know, they could use guns. One of them had a chainsaw. They could swim. They could ride motorcycles.
yeah. In that vein, I mean, of course, Dead Rising has always been ridiculous, but if that's the stuff that they're going off of, and if Frank is a zombie and he can do all this stuff, to me personally, I think that's gonna suck the life out of the character because we know Frank West for being Frank West.
Right.
Fighting to stay alive, a survivor, through all this time and being a complete badass. In Dead Rising 4, however, and it was shown in the video, this is not Dead Rising, in a sense that he was going around making your mama jokes,
Oh,
just stuff that was low grade quality, in my opinion, that really didn't fit. Even though, Frank, he isn't the most deepest character, he still has some meaning, some swagger to who he was, and this was represented well, I think, in Dead Rising 2 off the record. So, I want to go to the next point really quickly before we end off here,
yeah.
and that is the fact that Capcom reselling Frank Rising as DLC for a
Oh,
storyline continuation. Now, I pointed this out in a twit longer, and I basically showed off the fact that Capcom has done this before. They have previous history with showing off stuff that might need to be included in the ending of the game, but they choose to just cut it out and rebundle it as DLC. Like Asura's Wrath, I believe
yeah.
that had a true ending. I also believe that Street Fighter V was incomplete. It was an incomplete game, lacking modes. We didn't get the story mode till like much later. I know that people play fighting games for other various reasons, like to fight each other online,
Yeah.
but the fact that it was a game that lacked all of this content, it really didn't appeal to the crowd who wanted more replay value. This is something that I feel is very prevalent when you pay $60 for a game and you don't get the full experience. So what do you think about this Frank Rising DLC being the possible ending to Dead Rising 4, the possible conclusion?
Here's what I said before. If they're doing this, it's the dumbest idea ever. Because if you're cutting out any material that could be in the main game when you launch it, then one, it shouldn't be worth $60. Two, why even bother trying to put it out there if you're just putting it behind a paywall? And then on top of that, people people when it comes to DLC, like there's DLC when it comes to like expanding on gameplay, like shooters like Battlefield, Call of Duty, much as many of us hate Call of Duty now. Stuff like maps and extra weapons. If that was DLC, sure, but an ending as DLC, that's like if Marvel, when they put out their next movie, like if they put out, or when they put out Spider-Man Homecoming, and then you pay for the movie, but then right before the last 25 minutes happens, the film cuts off, and then they announce you got to pay an extra $10 just to see the ending and
Yeah,
the two bonuses. It's like nobody's gonna buy that.
yeah, no one's gonna buy into this that are rational. I made a comparison like this earlier with the Matrix. Like for example,
Oh man.
the moment where Agent Smith shoots Neo in the chest and you assume he's dead. What if they cut the rest of the movie out and resold it later to the point where Neo gets back up and he fights Agent Smith, but you don't have that piece of the movie for like 3 or 4 months? It's ridiculous.
Exactly.
No one will buy into this because they're not getting a complete experience. And with some forms of media like movies, it's not going to fly with certain people. It shouldn't.
Yeah, TV is one thing, but movies and video games it is not. Because like, if you're telling a story all in one bundle, you have to tell it all. Because it's like if you don't, then there's no fulfillment. It just stops at a certain point. And then on top of that, it's like if this is the true ending, but you get to that point where it's the quote unquote regular ending, what are the players gonna do until they get that true ending?
I,
Because like in Dead Rising 1, you got the ending when Frank was left on the building. Then it's like when you did that, you had to do the what was
Overtime.
it? Yeah, the overtime. And so he has to survive the tactical dudes, which he does, and it's like he had the potential to really get out of there, which we saw that was the true ending. And it's like I think for the longest time people thought he was dead, but it turns out he's not.
Yeah,
But
and
yeah,
I just wanted to say really quickly.
yeah,
Yeah, and they have multiple endings, so you can get bad endings. You can go back. You can get other endings that you didn't see. You can go back and you can get the best ending. You can go back and you can get like the overtime ending. So I I think personally for this Dead Rising game, they took out a lot of content. There is no disputing this. Fans are pissed. Some fans have went on record and said they aren't buying this game because of all the stuff they're taking out. And the fact that they have done this, I don't know why people are damage controlling it, because I mean everyone rational, they want a complete experience. It
yeah,
doesn't matter where you're from or what your values are or what you think. Having a complete game is going to matter at the end of the day because you're getting more bang for your buck.
exactly. In which case, for one, if the true ending is locked behind a paywall, then it's like no real reason to like really want to buy it because you want all of the features that should be there. And then number two, as far as this ending in terms of writing, again, it's very cliche. And from the looks of it, I don't know what's going on between him and Vicky, but
I
you know,
think that's like his. I think he's like the mentor of her, or something like that. That's his partner in crime. They have this sort of, father to daughter relationship as the game progresses. So it's something like that. Uh, Personally, what I believe is that once we get to the Steam and PS4 versions, they're going to resell this game with all the DLC, which makes buying the vanilla version null and void.
pretty much.
So this and I'm a big fan of the Batman Arkham games. I love
Oh
those
man,
games. Those games are amazing, but there's a reason why I waited for the Game of the Year edition, because they rebundle all the DLC, all the content, all the stuff that you had to buy separately into one package.
yeah. At the end of the day, it's just again from a gamer standpoint, a rational gamer standpoint, is like I don't think I want to buy it. It's like at first I was like, oh, Dead Rising 4. I think I might get this soon after it comes out if I have the money. But then it's like hearing about DLC for something that should be in there is just like, nope, nope, sorry, nope. Mm-mm. And again, as far as the ending, it's just, again, it's heavily cliched, which again, cliches, excuse me, cliches in and of themselves are not bad. But when it gets to a point where you're doing the same thing almost anybody else has done, it's time to reevaluate. And personally, this ending here is something that, for me, writing wise, I feel Capcom has had a problem with plenty of their games. Because, like, you look at the Street Fighter games, you got Street Fighter 1, then Street Fighter Alpha, then 2, which up till 3, the progression isn't so bad. But then it's like 4 takes place before 3, and it's like, okay. But then 5 takes place between 4 and 3. And I was like, wait a minute. It's like, are y'all trying to fill in some holes here, or are y'all just digging more?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, based on history, Capcom. I mean, they had good stories in the past. Very simple concepts like Resident Evil 3. You're trying to escape a city, and you have interesting characters that embody it. But then
Yeah.
it's like, we want to do prequels. We don't want to progress the story forward with Street Fighter. So they're not the best storytellers. And in my opinion, I believe that, if a human makes a mistake, what they should do is go back and find out what's the problem, how to correct it, how do we make our product better. And I believe they are not above criticism. They've made
Right.
mistakes in the past, they made mistakes this year. So Dead Rising 4 is definitely not a perfect game, and it just shows with all these removed features like the survivors, just being, very dumbed down, the food being like either I think it's taken away or it's just done in a way that's not like the previous series where you can mix and match things together and make these crazy combinations of powers, so to speak. Like you get quick step or you get like spitfire where you can spit flames at people. That stuff is fun.
Wow.
It makes me wonder why would they take stuff like that out if it's really not in the final product. But again, there is problems with Dead Rising 4. They did put like these three hipsters on the
Oh
development
no.
staff, and they did stuff like Connect games or stuff unrelated to Dead Rising. So Capcom still has that track record of putting people who really don't know what they're doing on lifelong projects that people really love and enjoy, and I don't understand why people are defending them all of a sudden. I think it's because it's timed exclusive on the Xbox, so a lot of people, every time an Xbox exclusive comes out, a lot of people just jump on that bandwagon, even though the PlayStation is probably going to get the better version later down the line.
Yeah, it's like if it's a timed exclusive, then it's like it's like don't jump on it so fast, because then it's like if it's supposed to have been something else unique to that particular console, then it's like I kind of get it, but at the same time, it's like if the game isn't that good, then you know we it's not really much you can say except it's not as great as it could have been. Cause
Same with Recore. I mean, that happened. That was a thing. A lot of people thought Recore was a little bit disappointing.
yeah, and Recore was a little bit disappointing, but then when you look at something like Quantum Break, because the thing when the game came out that I heard was how Quantum Break was the Xbox version of the Order 1886.
Oh no,
You you
God.
you know where I'm about to go next with this.
Good.
And when I heard that, it was just like, so you're telling me this game comes out, it's not as great as it was hyped up to be. So now you got people who are trying to put racism in products on the parallel.
And there's another thing too, like for Quantum Break, I think people were saying they spent too much time on the TV show aspect. They had like a mini series in there with
I
full
saw
fledged
that.
actors. Yeah.
I saw that when somebody was streaming it, which to me that's actually not a bad idea. But if they're spending more time on that than on the gameplay, then it kind of defeats the purpose.
Yeah. Like the gameplay, you're playing a game, right? So the gameplay is going to matter. If there's a game with too many cinematics or cutscenes or too much emphasis on the acting, then it sort of drags away from the experience of being a game if you're just watching a cutscene the entire time. This is the problem that many people had with Metal Gear Solid. It's a great, it's a great thing to watch, but when it comes to playing it and you get reduced playtime, it doesn't make it much of a game to some aspects. Metal Gear Solid is great gameplay wise, but there are those MGS games that make you ask, I want more. I want it more out of this experience than to have all these cutscenes. So I can understand people's resentment of features like this if this was in Quantum Break.
Yeah, in which case, if they want to tell a story and the game, if the game is long enough to where they can tell the story but include the gameplay as well. It's like especially especially when it's a game like it's like Metal Gear Solid, especially the first one. That's one of those games where you could probably go almost anywhere with the exploration and such. So in a way, it kind of makes up for it, but those cutscenes are still incredibly long. And then I think 4 was especially guilty of that too.
I also go ahead.
Yeah, because I remember like somebody did a full story playthrough of Metal Gear Solid 4. I got halfway through that playlist. I still haven't seen the ending after all these years. That's how bad it is.
And to take it back a little bit, I mean, I think personally, because I said this in the Twit Longer as well, I think the ending of Dead Rising 3 was much better because it set up a big bad, you know what I mean? It set up Isabella as being behind the outbreaks, and she was a supporting character, supporting role in the past where like she helped out Frank and you had to save her in Dead Rising 2 Case West, and then all of a sudden you find out in Dead Rising 3 she was behind the outbreak to draw out the Carlitos orphans or whatever they're called. I don't know the proper name, but I know she tried to draw out them, and that's what happened when she found Nick in the process. So it set her up to be the next big thing. Some conspiracy going on that the players really don't know, or the other characters at least. Let me rephrase that. So it had potential over this ending where you just assume that Frank just dies and that's the end of the game and that's it. And then you got the DLC, which pretty much debunks that, in my opinion.
Which in this case, this is treated more like a filler story that is given too much attention because something I said to a coworker once was about when it comes to filler, like when it's anime filler, is either one of two kinds of filler. It's a filler that can help progress something about the individual characters till they come back to the main story arc, or it's just something that gives characters to do in between the major story arcs. Now, when it's like American TV filler, like that particular show that I used to love, but now I'm kind of highly disappointed in, it was like when the filler is sprinkled in over the course of the season and there's still a main plot that we focus on, sure. But then like the last few years, it's gotten to where it's like partway through the season, you got the main story, but then either half, or in the case of season 10, majority of it is filler, and then the end goes back to main story. And it's just like, because like I started wondering, how would I have done this differently? And it's that kind of thing. In which case, if this was with the way this ending has gone, what I'll say is, if this was a story where Frank being there actually helps to push the story forward, where he has to stop Isabella, like like he has to stop her, and they used to have these platonic, maybe even somewhat romantic ties, and he feels some kind of way about having to stand up against her.
That sounds a lot better than what we got, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, but instead we're just getting this thing of he's investigating, he's got a story, we're not even sure what exactly is going to be told, and roll credits the end till the next game, and it's just like
this is some old bullshit.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what I think of it. I think there's just more interesting concepts they could have taken to put the story in a direction where it's like interesting, but it's still, you know, Dead Rising, wacky, fun, having a good time. Personally, I think that I'm not gonna be a sheep and buy this game vanilla, and then I expect like about 6 months down the line they're gonna release a complete edition. That's just a stupid thing to do. Like, if you want the full game and you know they're cutting out pieces, you might as well just fucking wait. Because, I mean, at a certain point, I mean, you're gonna want to know. I guess curious players, you're gonna want to know what happened at the end of that plot if it continues. You don't want to just sit there and look at it on YouTube when you played the game and enjoy it. You want to go out there and experience it for yourself. So I think that's what's gonna happen to Dead Rising 4. Personally, you know, I'm not getting it until it's complete. That's how I feel.
It might sell a little bit, but not to the potential it would have if it was at least developed to what it should have been.
Yeah.
Also the thing where he gets dog piled by zombies.
Yeah.
Once again,
It's stupid.
They are dumb as dirt.
It's stupid.
If he catches a helicopter and he's being pulled up, only the one zombie's hanging on. And
No, it's like multiple zombies. Multiple.
See, even then, I just can't buy it.
He should have just like bought out like a Blanca hat or something and electrocuted them. I mean, that would have been funny at least, you know, for an ending. But I gotta say, it's anticlimactic and disappointing. So I wanted to make this discussion. I guess I'm gonna turn it into a mini podcast because it's been like 30 minutes already. I just wanted to talk to Mr. Brian here about this ending, about Dead Rising 4, since you know he's into literature and I wanted to get his opinion. So we're gonna do our little outros now. So you can find me on Twitter at RenOperative_. You can find me on YouTube at Renegade Operative right here where this video will be uploaded, of course. And Mr. Brian, where can we find you?
You can usually find me on Twitter at MilkDudArtist. I'm thinking of doing some podcasts depending on what it is. I'm still not entirely sure. Hopefully work doesn't drain me too much, but I'll see what happens. And then you'll find me on YouTube as Brian Word. Yes, my last name is Word.
It's Brian Word 1, right?
That's on Twitter, yeah.
Okay, just making sure that everyone has the information. So yeah, this was fun. I'm gonna upload it because I kind of wanted to do this like as a solo recording, but I thought it'd be more interesting to get someone on board and see what he thinks about it, since, you know, Brian really likes literature and stories. So I'm gonna upload this as soon as I can. Hopefully you guys really enjoyed it, and as always, take care.
Good night, everybody.